That is when I saw the email thread. It was forwarded by my department head, completely out of context, and framed as evidence of my unprofessional instability. But when I scrolled up, past the part where I finally snapped, past the part where I accused my team lead, Alex, of sabotage, I saw the perfectly planned baiting. 5 months of calculated pokes, dismissive comments, and subtle undermining, all designed to make me look like the volatile problem child. It was not just an argument, it was a performance, and I was the unwitting star of the breakdown. The chilling part, Alex knew exactly what they were doing the entire time. How did I let someone orchestrate my professional downfall right under my nose? When Alex joined the team 9 months ago as our new lead, the office atmosphere shifted immediately. They were not like the previous leader, who was strictly corporate policy. Alex was relatable. They were young, energetic, and immediately established this intense, almost too personal connection with everyone. I remember our first one-on-one. Alex spent the entire hour sharing stories about their toxic ex-boss and how they had to work twice as hard to overcome trauma. They looked me dead in the eye and said, "You seem like the kind of person who gets it. Sarah, we are going to be a good team." It felt like a deep, immediate alliance. I was flattered. That was the first ignored red flag, the speed of the intimacy. Within 2 weeks, Alex was calling me their right-hand person. The second red flag came 4 weeks in. I casually mentioned a successful project from my previous job. A huge win for me. Alex smiled and said, "That is great. But we do not worry about old wins here. You need to prove yourself now." But I rationalized it as tough love, a necessary push in a high-stakes environment. I thought we were building something strong. I thought they were my mentor. What I did not realize was that I was being carefully mapped out, my vulnerabilities cataloged for future use. The manipulation started subtly, like a slow drip. By month 2, Alex had mastered the art of the dismissive critique. I would spend hours perfecting a strategy document, only for Alex to glance at it during our check-in and say, "Yeah, it is fine. Adequate, but look at what Mark did. Now that is innovation." There was no actionable feedback, just a constant comparison that left me feeling deficient. I started working 10-hour days just trying to reach that invisible benchmark. Then came the accidental isolation. We were pitching a major client merger proposal, a huge opportunity. I had done the bulk of the risk analysis. The night before the presentation, Alex called me at 11 p.m., sounding panicked. "Sarah, I made a mistake. I told the client you were overwhelmed and pulled you out of the presentation tomorrow. It is too high stakes for someone dealing with." Well, your recent stress. I had not said I was stressed. I was fully prepared. When I confronted them the next morning, my hands shaking in the hallway, Alex just looked confused. "Wow, you are really taking this personally." "I was protecting you. Do not worry. I will give you a shout-out." They did not. They took full credit for the risk analysis. This was the first major step in the baiting process. They created a crisis, then blamed my reaction to the crisis. For the next 3 months, the pattern intensified. Every time I proposed a solution or showed initiative, Alex would throw out a tiny undermining comment. During a team meeting, I suggested streamlining our reporting process. Alex waited until I finished, then sighed dramatically and said, "That is a very Sarah idea, very by the book. We need passion. Not spreadsheets, people." The team laughed nervously. I felt my face flush. Later that week, Alex gave me a huge, complicated project with an impossible deadline. They were breadcrumbing me with responsibility. They would say, "I am only giving this to you because I know you can handle the pressure, Sarah. This is your chance to prove you are not just by the book." But every time I missed a self-imposed deadline, because it was impossible, Alex would send a team-wide email reminding everyone of the critical need for timely delivery. I was terrified of failing them, so I worked 16 hours straight. When I finally delivered it, they barely responded. "Looks good for a rush job. We will talk about how you structure your time next week." No praise, just the promise of future criticism. I was constantly walking on eggshells, my self-worth entirely tied to Alex's sporadic, manufactured approval. I started questioning my perception of reality. Did I really say I was stressed? Was I actually by the book? I kept replaying conversations. trying to figure out where I went wrong. I was exhausted, paranoid, and ready to quit. This was not just a bad boss. This was psychological warfare, and I was losing. The true damage of this situation only became clear once I stepped back and started naming the tactics, which is the necessary first step toward recovery. Alex was not just a tough boss. They were deploying a few key manipulation strategies precisely and consistently. The primary weapon was baiting. Baiting is deliberately provoking a reaction, usually anger, fear, or insecurity, and then blaming the victim for the resulting emotional outburst. Alex used the comparison to Mark, the public dismissiveness, very Sarah idea, and the 11th hour removal from the presentation as bait. They pushed my buttons until I reacted unprofessionally, like that desperate, shaking confrontation in the hallway, and then they used my reaction as proof of my instability. Why did it work? Because I was taught to believe that professional adults should always maintain control. When I lost control, I instantly felt shame, which gave Alex more power. A red flag for baiting is if you find yourself constantly escalating arguments from 0 to 60, and the manipulator remains eerily calm while watching you unravel. The second tactic was devaluation. This was not one big insult, but a constant, subtle chipping away at my self-worth. Alex's comments, like adequate, or you need to prove yourself now, were designed to keep me perpetually insecure. Devaluation strips away your internal sense of competence and replaces it with dependence on the manipulator's judgment. I started believing I needed Alex's approval to function professionally. This made me desperate to please them, which meant I tolerated escalating boundary violations. The psychological hook is that they initially validated you calling me the right-hand person, so when the critique comes, you work harder to get the good person back. If your self-esteem has noticeably plummeted since interacting with someone, that is a massive red flag for devaluation. We also saw breadcrumbing. Alex knew how to keep me hooked just enough. They did not completely ignore me. They gave me the massive, impossible project. This was not a reward. It was a leash. Breadcrumbing is offering scraps of validation or opportunity, just enough to keep the victim hoping for the full meal. It kept me working 16-hour days. Why? Because the promise of next week's conversation, or the hint that this project was my big chance, activated my reward system. I was addicted to the potential validation. If you are constantly working harder for diminishing returns, chasing a vague promise of future recognition, you are likely being breadcrumbed. The setup relied heavily on strategic vulnerability. Alex immediately dumped about their toxic ex-boss in our first meeting. This moved our relationship from professional mentor-mentee to a shared secret alliance. Strategic vulnerability lowers your guard and creates a premature sense of obligation and intimacy. It makes you feel like you owe them sympathy or trust. I felt guilty questioning Alex because I believed they were a victim of past circumstances. The red flag here is rapid, intense self-disclosure that forces you into a confidante role before trust is actually earned. The exposure came unexpectedly, not through my efforts but through Alex's carelessness. After my desperate email, the one where I finally accused them of sabotage, I was placed on temporary leave, pending HR review. Alex was thrilled. They had successfully baited me into appearing unstable. But while I was gone, another colleague, Mark, the one Alex compared me to, was handed the impossible project I had completed. Mark noticed something strange in the project file metadata. He found a version history, a timeline showing that Alex had deliberately modified key data points in my initial risk analysis submission after I had submitted it, essentially sabotaging the accuracy, and then used that flawed analysis to pitch their own, completely different merger strategy. The final piece of evidence was an innocent-looking internal audit email. It showed Alex had also systematically deleted the positive feedback emails I had received from a high-level client 6 months earlier, the exact client I was removed from presenting to. When HR finally compared the documented evidence Mark uncovered with my unstable email, the pattern became undeniable. Alex had not just been a tough manager, they had actively manufactured my failure. When confronted with the metadata and audit trail, Alex did not rage or deny. They became eerily calm. They used DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. This is a witch hunt. This is Sarah trying to deflect from her performance issues. I was trying to help her with that project, and now she is twisting it. It almost worked, but the paper trail was too clean. Alex was quietly terminated, citing ethical breaches. I returned to a completely different office dynamic, but I was not the same. I felt immense relief, but also a deep sense of violation. It took months to trust my own judgment again. The emotional consequence was not anger. It was constant second guessing. Did I misread the room? Am I too sensitive? The experience taught me that the worst damage of manipulation is not the lost opportunity, but the erosion of self-trust. If you recognized any part of that story, the constant walking on eggshells, the feeling you are always chasing approval, the exhausting self-doubt, know this: you are not crazy, and you are not alone. This happens to smart, capable people who have empathy and who value hard work. What should I have known sooner? 3 non-negotiable red flags that should send you running. First, the need for speed. If someone pushes for rapid intimacy, professional or personal, sharing too much or demanding too much trust too quickly. Slow down. Trust is earned over time, not given in the first hour. Second, the chronic critic with no solution. If someone constantly critiques your work or character without providing concrete, actionable steps for improvement, they are not mentoring you. They are tearing you down. Criticism should be constructive, not corrosive. And third, the eerie calm during your storm. If you find yourself screaming, crying, or panicking, and the other person is watching your reaction with detached curiosity or smug calm, you have likely been baited. They are enjoying the show. How do you protect yourself? 3 practical steps for getting out of this dynamic. Document everything. I wish I had kept a timeline of every strange comment, every missed meeting, every dismissive email. Digital trails are your best defense. Second, establish external validation. Stop relying on the manipulator for your self-worth. Get feedback from trusted peers, mentors outside the department, or even friends. If everyone else thinks you are doing great, but one person constantly undermines you, trust the consensus. Third, practice the gray rock method. When you realize you are dealing with a strategic manipulator, stop giving them the emotional reaction they crave. Become boring. Respond to baiting with neutral, factual statements. I understand your perspective, or noted. Deny them the energy they are trying to extract. Manipulation works best in the dark, in isolation. By naming these patterns and sharing these stories, we bring them into the light. If you recognized yourself in this, please use the comments below to share your experience. You might just be the external validation someone else needs right now.